Usually it takes about 15 seconds. Okay, so this is, I just have to monitor on YouTube a little bit for a minute as to whether we're in. So give just everybody a chance to join in here. Give me a minute. Make sure I'm coming through on YouTube. Okay, I guess we're good to go. So listen, everybody, thanks for joining us again. If somebody could just indicate in the comments that they can hear us, I can see a thumbs up, so we're good to go. So this is John Haller. I appreciate you joining me again. I just did an interview a little while, an hour or so ago with Jonathan Feldstein of Genesis 123. And today I'm going to do my good longtime friend, Brian Schrauger. And we're going to just talk about what's going on. Brian, just tell everybody who you are and where you live in Israel or what you're doing over there and that type of thing.
Sure. I'm a journalist. I've been living in Israel since 2012, and I do some independent reporting for usually the Jerusalem Post when I write. And these days I'm also doing some video reporting for a ministry out of Texas called Tipping Point. Jimmy Evans is the guy running it.
Okay. So, I don't even remember. How did we meet the first time? How did we ever hook up?
I think we met through Jim Fletcher.
That could very well be.
I remember Jim telling me about you, and I don't remember how exactly we met, but I'm pretty sure he's the one who made me aware of who you are. And then I began watching some of your updates. But beyond that, I don't know how we met.
I know. It's sort of like, I kind of remember meeting my wife. That one, I kind of got that one nailed. But a lot of other people, those details get a little bit fuzzy.
Yes.
So anyway, we sort of had that mutual interest at the nonsense that went on at a thing called Christ at the Checkpoint. And you had attended those in Bethlehem there a couple times. I went to one in Oklahoma, and it seems like those were all very, very long time ago. But it seems like all those issues are coming back to the forefront. So let's talk about October 7th, which is sort of fixed in everybody's mind. I remember I was opened my phone about 12:30 a.m. in the morning, and stuff was just flowing through my phone. 10 dead, 100 dead, 200 dead in Israel, an attack and hostages and all that stuff. And it's been a crazy. Well, it's been about 60 days now since that happened. As I mentioned to Jonathan Feldstein, it was actually a year ago today that I was in Israel for the Christian Media Summit.
Really?
Yeah, and we went down to the Gaza fence to the. I don't know if I don't think you went down that day, did you?
I did not go.
Okay, we went down to Niram, a kibbutz, and we also went to the Urban Warfare Training Center, and that was a year ago today. It seems like that was about 12 years ago now. But a lot has happened. So just kind of tell me what your observations are as to things that have been happening in Israel, what you've seen and experienced over the past 60 days.
A big question. The atmosphere here is one of not post-traumatic stress or post-trauma. It is one of active, ongoing trauma, and it's culture-wide. And the symptoms of that trauma are obvious with everyone. Not sleeping through the night, waking up at 2, 3 in the morning, not being able to go back to sleep, or staying up for an hour or two checking the news, and then getting maybe another hour's sleep before getting up and going to work. There are very, very heightened emotions, a lot of sadness. Israelis, when Israelis see other Israelis kidnapped and killed, it is as if a family member has been murdered or has been captured. And Israelis regularly go to funerals of of people that they would not otherwise have known. And they're also going to weddings. They're attending the weddings of soldiers who are getting married because they don't know when they'll have a chance to do so. They don't know how long this war will last. So there are symptoms of trauma, but there's also a remarkable level of volunteerism here. The government has really fallen very, very short in terms of taking care of the material and even some of the military needs of its soldiers in terms of, say, clothing, boots, bulletproof vests, that kind of thing. But where it has not been able to, or has not performed or stepped up, all Israel has stepped up. There are people who are doing laundry for soldiers. There are many who volunteer to go out and help farmers near Gaza harvest their crops. I've done this twice. And it's a very meaningful kind of response and very, very moving. It's very much a family atmosphere here, but a family that is in crisis, a family that's in trauma, but a family that is refusing to lay down.
So there have been a lot of, this started off with probably the largest rocket barrage ever seen from Gaza, literally thousands of rockets in a very short period of time. You've experienced some of that. You live south of Jerusalem, and tell us, what's that like? I mean, it's totally foreign to our experience. What do you go through when that happens?
Well, different people go through different things. I can tell you that it was on October 7th. I happened to be in the Golan for the Sukkot holiday, and that particular day was the holy day of Simchat Torah, celebration of Torah. It's the time of year when the Jewish readings of Torah circle all the way back to the beginning. There are set readings that they go through every week. And I was in a household that is Sabbath observant. That means they don't turn on or off lights. They don't look at their phones. They don't care if I do, but I woke up early and went out in the front yard. And in fact, I didn't make it to the front yard before I noticed that phones that were on mute were vibrating or even sounding out loud alarms, which is never done on Shabbat. I went and picked them up and looked at my own phone and went outside and saw that we were under attack. And interestingly enough, all that day, the entire household, which is Shabbos observant, they were on their phones all day long. We didn't know, though. We didn't know how bad it was. I think when you woke up, we were like a number of hours into the attack. But as it unfolded, all we knew at the time was that we just knew about the barrage of rockets. We did not know what was happening in terms of the invasion of Israel down in the south. When I returned to Jerusalem on Sunday the 8th, I actually ended up in Bethlehem, or a city near Bethlehem. And while I was there was an attack. And there was the sirens went off, and I have an alert system on my phone called Red Alert, and it began blaring. And also Israel has something called Home Front Command, and it also alerts you. So I heard it, and I knew that living here, we had about 15, 20 seconds. And this is not what's recommended, but I went out on my porch, and I looked up, and directly overhead, there was a rocket that was intercepted. And it wasn't going to, if it had landed, it would not have hit Jerusalem. It would have hit Palestinians in Bethlehem. And then last Friday, I was volunteering to help farmers with their crops. We went to a place where we're assigned different farm to go to. And then as we got there, we discovered, no, the IDF has told us we can't go there because it's too close to Gaza. We could not get within 7 kilometers, they told us. So we were reassigned to a different farm, which interestingly enough took us to a location just north of the Gaza border, which was probably 3 miles away. And the road where we turned off to go to the farm, the road was blocked by the IDF. They weren't allowing anybody to get any closer to Gaza. We went down to the farm, got out of the car, and as soon as we got out of the car, 4 Hamas rockets were directly overhead. And they were intercepted immediately, I assume, by Iron Dome, although Israel does not publish or announce these days what Iron Dome does or does not do. They were intercepted. We could see the interceptions. They were right overhead. And I guess there was some danger of shrapnel, but I didn't think about it at the time. So for me, I find it interesting. I find it, some people don't like it, but I find it kind of exciting,
Right.
in a dark way. Now, a lot of people here don't. A lot of people here are terrified. These go off, and if they're driving down the road, what you'll see is Israelis getting out of their cars, getting on the road, and putting their hands over their heads, because with the idea that the hands might protect the head from shrapnel, and children and adults, everyone gets out, and the cars stop, and you'll see this on the roads. So a lot of people are terrified here. It's like any kind of grieving process or a process of stress. People respond differently. I've had some experience with the grieving process, and so I know from experience of the different stages or components of grief. You've got denial, you got anger, you've got negotiation, and it doesn't go in any particular order. You bounce around between all these things. That's very much what you see here. So you see different people responding. Some people responding by getting busy, others responding by kind of curling up in a ball, at least internally, if not externally. Israelis don't tend to do that, but they do on the inside. You won't see them doing it on the outside, but they tend to get busy. In any case, it's a very interesting reality.
Have you been able to there's been maybe 200,000 people that have been evacuated from the north. So when you were up in the Golan, you're about as far away as you can get from Gaza in Israel. I mean, you were quite a ways away. But so there's been about 200,000 people evacuated from the south and also from the north. And the area in the south where you've been helping out on the farms, that's largely agricultural area, right?
Yes. All around Gaza, it's very, very rich farmland. Everything you can think of is grown there. From we harvested cherry tomatoes once, and the last time I was there, when the rockets were exploding overhead, we were working at on a particular area of a farm that grows cucumbers. So, but yeah, it's rich farmland.
And are those crops just not getting harvested this year in large part?
Yeah, that's the problem. That's why it's been so. They've had volunteers coming out from all around Israel, 7 days a week, and you go out and you usually show up at the farm at about 9 o'clock in the morning and work until about 1, and then because of Shabbat, and Shabbat's coming in early these days with the time, the sun and whatever, and so people leave and they go back for Shabbat. Before this happened, these farms were using labor from Gaza and from foreign laborers, like from Thailand, for example.
And so, I mean, what happened to, I don't know, 80,000 people in the south, 120,000 people in the north? Where did they go?
Good question. The people in the south have largely gone into areas in the southern part. Well, actually, the north as well. A lot of people from kibbutzim and other communities around Gaza are today filling up the hotels of the Dead Sea. I was just out there a week ago today, in fact, interviewing a spokesperson for the Be'eri kibbutz community, which was hit especially hard. About 10% of their entire population was slaughtered on that day, and another 50 people or so were taken hostage. You can see the footage of what happened at this kibbutz easily. You can find it on YouTube or elsewhere on the internet. So they're staying in these hotels, which look very nice. You know, these are resorts. These are places that people in Israel and around the world go to get away. But it's not an easy place to live with your family and to be entirely displaced from your home. Again, what I observed when I was out there last Friday is that there was an atrium area, an open atrium with the hotel rooms were around the outside. You see this in a lot of hotels. And that whole atrium was filled with goods and services that were being donated to these refugees who came with nothing. But they could find clothing, they could find medical needs, they could find baby strollers. There were counseling booths, and more. Pretty much anything you can think of, makeup, just things for everyday life that people use and need. Some have ended up at hotels in Jerusalem. I know that there are some from the north in a well-known hotel here called the Prima Kings Hotel, right in downtown Jerusalem. And some are in Tel Aviv. Others, as many as could do or had the option to do so, have gone to live with family members. And so you have hundreds of thousands of people from both the north and the south who have been displaced.
But I mean, that has to have a massive economic impact as well, because I mean, they all had businesses and farms and that sort of thing. I mean, have you been back up to the Golan since this happened?
I haven't. I would like to go up. When we left the Golan on Sunday, October the 8th, we saw tanks and army trucks and hundreds and hundreds of cars in makeshift parking lots, which had been driven to that area by reservists who were being called up and going to the north. So from the beginning, Israel was aware that the north presented a threat, and they've had a big force up there. And now, of course, a lot of people, especially those who live close to the border with Lebanon, have had to leave their communities. They're abandoned now. They're ghost towns. So yeah, the impact is huge, just huge, economically as well as emotionally, and in pretty much every way you can imagine.
So have these people been given any indication as to how long this is going to take? They're going to be out of their homes? I mean, I've heard different numbers from people in Israel, but I just kind of want to know what you've been hearing about it.
Nobody thinks they're going to go home anytime soon, and many are not willing to go back unless they have assurances and clear common sense assurances that they will be safe. Communities near Gaza are not going to go back unless they know, as much as you can know, that the government's going to protect them. Most of them feel keenly betrayed. There was an implicit contract, they argue, between themselves and the government because they live so close to the enemy that the government would be there to protect them. And the spokesperson I mentioned a while ago, with whom I spoke last Friday, who is with the Be'eri kibbutz community, said it was a one-day Holocaust. He said it was a Holocaust for one day. He said it wasn't like in World War II, but for one day, we had no protection, and Jews were completely vulnerable to being slaughtered, and there was nobody there to protect them. Nobody. And no help didn't show up. This particular, his name is Dr. Alon Pauker, and he told me that he and his wife were in their safe room in their house from 6 a.m, and it wasn't until 9 o'clock that evening that they were finally able to come out. So they were in there for 9 hours without food, water, electricity, and hoping and praying that Hamas wouldn't come knocking on their doors. And in fact, for at least Alon Palker and his wife, they didn't. They were a very fortunate family. But for many, Hamas came in, they would bang on the doors, they would try to open the doors. And if they could open it, you'd be taken out, and many were just killed. Or if they couldn't open the doors, they would fire guns directly into the room. And or if they could, they would set the room on fire, forcing people there to go out windows or whatever and escape, where many of them were just killed as soon as they were outside running. So, yeah, I mean, when will they go back? Nobody thinks it will be anytime soon. Again, I'm going back to this person with whom I spoke a week ago, and he told me the government is working with them to build a temporary kibbutz somewhere far from Gaza. I think somewhere closer to the Dead Sea, farther east in Israel. But Israel's a very small country, so it's not that no matter where you are.
Well, I was reading the lady, I can't ever remember her name. She runs the Alma research up in the north. And she was saying, that we've got to come back, but we won't come back until we can feel that we're safe. And right now, particularly with Hezbollah, there's, I imagine people feel a little bit safer being near Gaza than they do being near the Lebanese border. When Pam and I were there in 2017, we drove along the whole Lebanon border, all the way from the Golan all the way over to Nahariya. And, it's, as you said, it's a small country. I mean, we left Jerusalem in the morning and we were in Nahariya in the afternoon, having driven all the way up through the Golan and along the border. And she said, we're a small country. We have to live from border to border. Mm-hmm. And right now we can't. And what's the, it's just hard to kind of grasp the long-term effect of that. I don't think we have anything in our experience in America that even begins to compare with what is being experienced there right now.
Well, even here, Israelis are saying there's nothing like this has happened since the country was reborn in 1948.
I mean, so you're talking about wars in 48 and 49, 56, 67, 73, and this one's different.
This one's different and is every bit as much, if not more, of an existential threat to Israel than any other conflict it's had. Hamas is determined to destroy the Jewish state.
Yeah. So so you mentioned there's a lot of, I don't know how to say it, a lot of recriminations going on about what happened that October 7th was able to happen. But what's the political situation like there right now from your observation?
Well, there is virtually universal agreement here that there was gross negligence. There was intelligence. We're seeing this more and more now. There was intelligence that Israel and Israeli officials in different branches, different levels, ignored or minimized. They said it would not. This kind of thing would not happen. So, at some point, there will be a reckoning. I suspect that Benjamin Netanyahu will not last. There is his popularity has, as much as he had it here, has plummeted. Even before the war, the country was very, very divided about his government, mm-hmm. which is the first government he's had that has been exclusively ultra-right wing. Other governments he's formed in the past have had non-religious, non-right wing components, which he was able to use to offset the perceived extreme policies that the right wanted to impose. But with this government, he doesn't have that. And to many, it appears that he's been held captive by wanting to keep this government together. And now this has happened, and something has to change. Something has to change in terms of leadership here. Right. Now, when that will happen, I don't know. And who it will be, we don't know. Or who will rise, and there are several people here that seem to be doing a very, very good job of being straightforward and honest. One of them is, and I'm sure you've seen him, is Naftali Bennett. I mean, he's actually been remarkable. He's been going everywhere and appearing on talk shows and dealing with questions with grace and aplomb. He's very impressive.
Right.
And he's also very respectful. He says, I refuse to slam the sitting prime minister. So he will not even go after his political opponent. He refuses to do so. So he's very much a class act. So I don't know. He could come back, but who knows?
Yeah, he was prime minister for a short time, right?
Very short time, right?
And it's an interesting situation with political turmoil in the midst of a war, and that deals with the existence, that's an existential threat to Israel. So where do you think this thing is? What's your perception of where this is going to be going over the next? I know it's hard to predict. If we had talked 75 days ago, we would be talking about the expansion of the Abraham Accords to include Saudi Arabia. And you remember Mohammed bin Salman gave a interview on Fox News with Bret Baier, and then a couple days later, Bibi Netanyahu was in the well of the General Assembly in New York City talking about we're on the verge of a new Middle East, and 2 weeks and a day later, it was a new Middle East, but not the one that anybody had envisioned on September 22nd. So with that in mind, I know that it's an impossible task to ask you to kind of look down 30 or 60 days, but just what are you hearing and what do you see happening?
Well, there's no doubt in the minds of anybody here, but that in terms of international support, especially from the USA and even from some countries in Europe, Germany, England, France, there is a limited window of opportunity for Israel to act with the support of these countries. And so what we're seeing right now in Gaza is an extra hard push as the IDF goes in. They've been in northern Gaza up until last week. They were entirely they're now going into southern Gaza. Up until that point, they'd been in northern Gaza. So now they're going down where a lot of the leaders have fled. It's going to be a very intense time of war for the next 3 or 4 weeks. And hopefully Israel will be able to accomplish a lot in terms of getting the leaders of Hamas. Politically, we're going to see, well, first of all, it's important to say that while there is political uncertainty, there is a remarkable unity here at the same time. And so this country, which was so thoroughly divided before October 7, is now remarkably unified. It has come together in just unbelievable way. It's something that I don't think in the West we could even ever begin to perceive. It would be like everyone on the left and the right in the US suddenly becoming one. And that's what's happening.
Right. Yeah, like that.
But that's what's happened. It's happened because there is a common ethos there's a common ethos, or there's a common they relate to each other as family, and then there's the ethos of life, and also never again. We will not allow the genocide of our people or attempted genocide of our people to ever happen again. And those things drive Israelis even more than their passionate political discourse. And so they have come together on this. And it's a remarkable thing to see. Politically, though, I think we're going to see questions about who, will Netanyahu stay in his position as prime minister until after the war, whenever it ends? Even now, he is, as he always does, he's arguing that he's the best one to handle this or that.
Sure.
He can handle the Arabs best. He can handle the Palestinians best. And, a lot of people over the years have predicted his demise, and they've been proven wrong.
There's been a lot of political obituaries written for Bibi Netanyahu, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult for him to survive this. But then I saw an article, I can't remember where, I'm just flooded with information these days, as I'm sure you are, that there's actually an upside for him in this whole situation. Now, I personally don't see it, but it's a very difficult thing. Let me ask you this. I mean, so we have that sort of common bond thing that we've both been to these at the checkpoint conferences and saw what happened there, where it's I forget one writer, maybe it might be Paul Wilkinson or somebody, called it Christian Palestinianism,
right?
And the way you even see guys like Rick Wiles on True News talking about, well, Jesus was a Palestinian refugee, and this just utter theological nonsense. But one of the things that's really troubling here, and I think I've mentioned this to you, is I open my Twitter feed, and it is just a flood of, I wouldn't even call it anti-Semitic, I would call it outright overt Jew hatred flooding my Twitter feed all the time. It's unbelievable. And it comes from people who 60 days ago we might have considered to be, well, they might be an ally of ours on certain things, but just, so do you perceive that this anti-Semitism, Jew hatred is rising?
Absolutely, unequivocally, yes. It's happening here most overtly among Muslim Palestinians and Arabs. Not all Muslims, but those that are Islamists, I guess you could say, who are radical Islamists. And yes, there's a keen awareness of what's going on in other countries. I mean, Israelis know what's happening on the international political, social field. They know it because their people are everywhere, and they have connections all around the world as a result of being dispersed for almost 2,000 years.
Well, what's advice for you? I mean, because it's very, very difficult to not respond in just anger or rage at the nonsense that I'm seeing. I mean, the pure propaganda, now that the stories have all come out about the women being raped to the point that their pelvises were broken, shot in their genitals, and it's the description is horrific. And then the people say, well, that there's no proof of it. There's no proof that it happened. And and Hamas denies it, so we have to believe Hamas. What's your advice on how do we respond to this?
Well, I struggle with this. I mean, what do you do? I mean, there's a part of, I think, when you know the truth, there's a part of you that just wants to go, be apoplectic about the whole thing. But that doesn't accomplish anything.
Wait, you mean you've never seen anybody win an internet argument?
No. There are a couple of things that I can tell you I do to try to cope. And they really are kind of spiritual warfare things, because that's what this is when it comes right down to it, is this is a spiritual warfare classic from Ephesians chapter 6. So how do you fight? And it's a battle in the mind, and you have to keep the mind, you're constantly pulling the mind back into alignment. So one thing I do is I pray every day, please calibrate and recalibrate all of me to all of you, because I get out of tune just like that. I do some things that might not work for other people, but one thing I do is I have instrumental worship music playing softly in the background, basically 24/7. And it just helps my mind. It helps the atmosphere. And because often the things that are being played have words from things I remember, hymns or worship music, those then circulate in my mind as I hear, even if it's subconsciously. It helps focus my mind. And then there's just no substitute. There's no substitute for intense time directly one-on-one in focused prayer. And we can't just do, bless me prayers. We need to do warfare. I think we need to intercede for different areas of the world and name them. One thing that I do that has helped me a lot in this regard is I've written out a prayer thing that I go through every day. But at the beginning and at the end, I include people by name. And I ask, it's quite a list. You're on that list. And I say, please, Abba, let all these things that I pray be not only from and for me, but also as from and for each and one of these. Then all the things that I'm praying for are not just for me, but for others. And you know what? I also pray by name for political enemies and for enemies. And that helps, because then they are humanized. They're not dehumanized, as we tend to do with enemies. I'm still very, very angry. I mean, Christ at the Checkpoint now is worse than ever. The guy leading it, Munther Isaac, pastors a church in Bethlehem called Christmas Lutheran Evangelical Church. And he and the president of Bethlehem Bible College, Jack Serra, are traveling around the world talking to people about the horrors of they actually explicitly say Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. And what Munther Isaac has done, you can find this on Facebook. He's put up a so-called manger scene in his church, which shows baby Jesus in a pile of rubble. And this is what Jesus would be, how it would be if he was born today. He'd be born as is the rubble in Gaza. So, and then I guess one other thing that I think about a lot, and that is,
it seems very sacrilegious at a minimum.
Absolutely. I mean, it's taking the gospel, and this is what liberation theology people do, is they take the cross, and now they're taking the birth of Jesus, and they politicize it, and they make it all about social justice, and here they make it about the Palestinians and the anti-Israel Palestinian narrative. One thing I keep in mind, and I wish I could get across to a lot of people, is that we live in an age of confusion, where it's often very difficult to know what is true and what is not true. And we're seeing eruptions of non-truth among those of our own belief system and communities. So how do we determine what's true? And I think one thing, the canary, if you will, in the coal mine that alerts us to non-truth is anti-Semitism, where we see eruptions of Jew hatred, of anti-Semitic narrative. It's a warning sign. There's poison in the air. There's poison in the doctrine. There's poison in the thinking. There's poison in the culture. And it's something to move away from. You don't stay around and breathe that stuff. sometimes you fight it, but sometimes you just got to get out of the mine. You got to get out of there because it's literally poison. So it's a shortcut, if you will, to determine what's true and what's not true. And that is, where do leaders of every stripe, religious, political, social, whatever, where do they stand on Israel? What is their real attitude toward the Jews, toward the Jewish people? And what we're seeing is an eruption, a major eruption of anti-Semitic Jew hatred, as you said, around the world. And it should be, especially, I think, concerning to all of us, that we're seeing it happen among our own, if you will.
I'll just interject. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
And I see all this stuff about. It's like they know the protocols of that fake anti-Semitic book that I think came out of Russia.
Yeah.
Back in the late 1800s, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, right. And it seems like that's like a guidebook. They look at that as a guidebook, and then you see all this nonsense about they're not really Jews in Israel. They're Khazarian mafia or whatever it is, stuff that's been debunked about 8 ways from Sunday.
Right.
And by the way, if I brought up the Khazarian mafia thing in Israel, what would the response be?
Laughter.
Right.
Scorn. I mean, and also, I mean, it always amazes me that people.
And this is just among the common folk, not even among the ruling.
No. It amazes me too that anyone would think that Jews here are not Jews. They are so explicitly, overtly, visibly Jewish. In their observation of Torah, in their manner, in the holidays, the holy days that they celebrate, in their fast days, remembering everything from 3,500 years ago to today. This is a Jewish people. And of course, it's also backed up scientifically. They can trace their DNA now all the way back to whenever. There's no doubt that these are Jewish people. It's crazy for anyone to claim otherwise.
Well, it's symptomatic of people. Look, we're both Bible prophecy guys and that type of thing, and we think we're sort of nearing the end of this age, and this Israel thing is very it's important. I mean, I've said this so many times over the last 60 days, especially. It's like, I know people don't want it. They don't like Israel being involved. They don't like it. But it's like, I don't see how a lot of these prophecies that we see in the Bible and that are even accepted by Jewish people, I don't see how it doesn't work without Israel back in the land. That's the point I'm saying. It doesn't mean that I think we can stipulate they're not perfect. I think we could probably stipulate that the church in America is not perfect.
Very much so.
Yeah. That seems to be an easy thing to establish, but it's very troubling to me, and I'm distressed by it. And like I said, I don't know if somebody thinks I need to be some AI god. Some places decided I need to be trained, but my Twitter feed is just packed with this stuff every day.
Yeah,
it's just constant.
I'd like to share one thing.
Sure.
It has to do with support for Israel. One of the criticisms against Christians who support Israel, and by the way, Christ at the Checkpoint, Bethlehem Bible College now, in fact, for the last 5-6 years, have not been focusing their attacks on Jews primarily. They've been focusing their attacks on the likes of us. They focus their attacks on Christians who support the Jewish state, who stand with Israel. And one of their accusations is these Christian Zionists worship Israel more than they do God or Jesus. And I suppose there are some that do get into that, but that's not true. Why is Israel so important? And one reason, not the only one, but one reason is that our aim and our lives is to know and be known by the one who is genuinely Yeshua. And if nothing else, he's Jewish. He is an Orthodox Jew. Granted, he came to reform Judaism, but he was an Orthodox Jew, and the Jews are his people. We cannot, his human family, we cannot know him genuinely, authentically, unless we know him in his Jewishness. And when he talked about the least of his brethren, what we do for the least of his brethren, we do this for him. He was talking about his human family. So we stand with the Jewish people for reasons that include justice and common sense and morality. But we also stand with him because this is his family. And when you love somebody, you love what they love. And some of their relatives might not be easy to love, but you work really hard to care about those that your loved one cares for. Right. And Israel, the Jewish people, are the apple of God's eye. How can we not love them?
Right. And, there are passages too. I mean, I think they're more specific towards the end of the age, but, the sheep and goats judgment and caring for the least of these, my brethren, this stuff as we think, well, it's Bible prophecy. It's always kind of far off and it doesn't really ever have anything to do with me. But now it does seem like it does have things to do with us. Right. And that's another one where, I mean, how do we live that out? I mean, I think that's something we need to deal with. And I agree. You can make anything an idol. You could make Israel an idol. You can make America an idol, a particular political parties an idol. Mm-hmm. And it's always a matter of balance. I mean, I'm not saying you completely dissolve, separate yourselves from politics if that's what you feel you're calling, but this Jew hatred that is so overtly stated by people who claim to be evangelicals and Christians and that type of thing is just, it's maddening. It's shocking and it's maddening.
And it's sickening, and it's nauseating, and it's
well, so now let me do something more upbeat. Let's turn to the American administration's response to this.
Okay.
And of course, Kamala Harris, the great intellectual light of the vice president's office in our history, she was at COP28 and did a press conference, and she said that, and of course she's on message from our administration, which I refer to as as the Biden administration for obvious reasons. She was talking about we need to reconstitute the Palestinian Authority and put them in charge of Gaza. And so you've lived there for a dozen years now or so. How's that sound resonate with you?
First of all, the Palestinian Authority is pretty
now try not to laugh too hard. Okay.
Yeah, the Palestinian Authority is pretty much a fiction. What the world calls the West Bank in Judea and Samaria, and what are in fact more properly called the Palestinian territories after the Oslo Accords. These areas from Jenin in the north to Ramallah kind of in the middle to Hebron in the south, these are really separate tribal entities. And so Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, they really don't have a lot of clout, for instance, in Jenin or in Hebron. There are tribal leaders there who have the clout. Abbas is also not long for this world, and that's what I'm hearing from reliable sources.
Abbas being in what we like to say the 15th year of his 4-year term.
Yes, and I guess I shouldn't say his name, but someone I know very well who is himself an Arab Israeli, and is, a foremost journalist, said that he didn't expect Abbas to live till Christmas. Well, Christmas is pretty close now, so maybe he will. But his sources were telling him that Abbas has cancer and it's in advanced stages, and he wasn't likely to live very long. So everyone's kind of waiting for Abbas to go. The Palestinians can't stand Abbas. So, and if there were elections right now, Hamas would win.
I was just going to say Hamas would probably win. At least,
Um,
the guys over at the IDSF and we both know, and other surveys have shown that, there's high support for Hamas in the Palestinian territories, the West Bank, in the 75-80% range. And at least my short time that I've been there, that's my observation too, is that nobody likes the Palestinian Authority. And it just kind of seems unbelievable to me that our government is, I don't know, stupid enough to believe that they can reconstitute it.
It's magical thinking in a part, and also it's been so ingrained, I think, that there has to be a two-state solution that any other framework is not willing to be even considered. I think it's important to note that among the Palestinians, there's a tendency here, and I want to address this. There's a tendency to, and especially during this time of war, to start to regard all Arabs as the enemy. Mm-hmm. They aren't. Israel, about 20% of Israel's population, not in Judea, Samaria, not in the West Bank, about 20% is Arab. And some of them, yes, don't like Israel or its policies, but none of them want to be Palestinians. And many of them are very patriotic. And you'll find a number of them, a number of spokesmen right now for Israel are Arab individuals. Also, there is a difference between certain groups. The problem here, the problem with anti-Israel sentiment is emphatically not it's not a racial issue. It's an ideological issue. It's an ideology of anti-Jew hatred that comes in part from secular, but comes also largely from radical Islam. And so it's this radical Islamic ideology that is infecting people and is primarily driving this anti-Israel Jew hatred. So what you see in parts of Bethlehem anyways, there is still, at least in part of it, in one community, there's a large number of Christians. Granted, they are Christians who are Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox for the most part, but they're not out to destroy Israel. They might not like Israel, but they actually would like nothing more if they'll talk to you, because it's very risky for them to say anything. They'd like nothing more than normalization, because most of them, and a number of them, are very wealthy here, completely contrary to
the poor oppressed, right? We should be so oppressed.
Especially Christian Palestinians, but also a number of Arab Palestinians in the Bethlehem area are extremely wealthy. I mean, you would not believe the high-end cars everywhere. They're everywhere here.
Well, Brian, when we were there, we went up to Bethel and that type of thing, and the neighborhoods around those archaeological sites they look like Beverly Hills.
There's a lot of money here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting too. Things are not as they might seem they should be here. So to evangelicals, they might tend to think, well, Catholics and Greek Orthodox are going to be the anti-Israel ones, and evangelicals are going to be the pro-Israel ones. It's just the opposite here. Not always, but I mean, a big community of the so-called evangelicals, although they're not technically evangelicals, they're really liberal Protestants.
Right.
But they call themselves evangelicals, Bethlehem Bible College and their ilk. virulently anti-Israel, and they use Christian theological terms to promote an explicit anti-Israel narrative. In everyday life, business life, people here who are Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox, they just want to do business. They want to live, and they are making their money, as I said earlier, in part by, in one way or another, by doing something with Israelis or Israel. And that's how they make money. They prosper, and they know it.
I've often thought if you've been up to Nablus and up there from Mount Gerizim, you see it's probably the biggest home in the West Bank. That guy and I.
Yeah, I've seen it.
When I was there with Joel Kramer, my question was, what does that guy do for a living? Does he sell security fencing to the Israelis? Because that seemed to be the most common product that I saw during our time up there in that area. But so I probably need to, I promised everybody it would be 30 minutes. And as everybody knows, John Haller's estimate of 30 minutes is there's a John Haller 30 minute and there's a real world 30 minutes. But so sometime we'll talk about the tribal thing more, because I think that's a interesting, fascinating thing. And I'm trying to schedule an interview with Dr. Mordecai Kedar about that, because he's probably the leading light, I think, in Israel on that particular topic, at least that theory. But so just give us in the last couple minutes here, what are some practical things that we can do as Christians to show our support and support Israel?
Well, right now Israel has a lot of needs. There are any number of organizations. They should be researched, find out who's doing a good job, where money can be sent to provide food, clothing, bulletproof vests, housing, any number of things. Another thing we're seeing here, I would love to see more of, are people coming on solidarity volunteer tours. That's a thing here now. People are coming on tours, and they're going, as I did a couple of times, they're going out to help farmers harvest. And there are any number of other volunteer opportunities here for people who wanted to help with something that has to do with computers or administration or with families. There's a literally or virtually an infinite number of things that can be done here. So I would encourage people who are thinking, well, I can't go to Israel now because of the war. Come because of the war. Come visit because of the war. Israel will be deeply appreciative, and it will change your life. It will change your life. You won't just be coming to see the sights. You'll be coming to serve and help the people. And it would be absolutely a wonderful thing for you and for those who are in your sphere of influence.
Sounds good. Hey, just quick, the leading, I don't remember if we talked about it or not, the leading lights, the presidents of MIT, Harvard, Penn, in Congress yesterday. What's your take on what they had to say?
Well, you and I can't ever say we're speechless because we talk a lot, right? But yeah, that was my first response, is like just flabbergasted, because under interrogation by, I can't remember this congresswoman's name, they said that they were unwilling, not one of them was willing to say that speech calling for the annihilation of the Jews was forbidden by their policies, and they wouldn't say it. In fact, one or two of them actually said, as you know, that what was it? If it becomes something that's actually, if it turns into an action, then it might be.
Oh, so in other words, when there's actually genocide, then we might talk about it.
Actually, so in other words, when you go kill somebody, a Jew, and you do it, because you hate the Jews, well, then it might be anti-Semitic.
It's just, it's, I flip on, I always tell people I always like to know what the enemy's doing, so I'll turn on MSNBC in the Morning Joe and Mika Brzezinski. And I will tell you that, we talk about sometimes there's a unity among people on different parts of the political spectrum. And they were just like all over these, like, I can't believe anybody would send their kid there. I can't believe how did this happen? What happened to academia? And it's sort of like, you need to have been listening to us for like 80 years and you would have a better clue, but welcome to the club. Okay. But even they were upset with what they heard yesterday.
Well,
And I mean, it was, and I'm not talking like it was like, oh yeah, that's bad. I mean, they were verbally aggressive in condemning this nonsense. But
if
that's where we are.
If anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine, or the canary dies when anti-Semitism crops up, then we're seeing that this poison is in our main institutions, our educational institutions in America. And what do? Do you go to those institutions? Do you send your children to those institutions? Would you send them into a coal mine where there was no oxygen?
Right.
To die? No. I mean, these are signs of profound deviation from truth, and deadly, not only profound, but deadly deviations from truth.
Right.
And it's the same kind of, these are the same deviations that we saw in a fairly narrow part, or a small part of the world, comparatively speaking, in the 1930s. We saw this in Germany, but now we're seeing this taking root all over the place, all over the world.
Yeah, I said that to somebody. They said, was this like the 30s in Germany? I said, no, this is worse, because this is all over the world.
Exactly.
So anyway, look, Brian, I'm going to terminate it. Thanks so much.
Good fun. Thank you.
People can follow you. You'll be doing some things with Tipping Point Ministries, and you do write occasionally for the Jerusalem Post, so people can Google your name and find out things that you've written recently and anything else, and let me know, and I'll get them up on Facebook and that type of thing. Thanks for your time today. And folks, thanks for listening. I know I kind of intruded on you twice today. Appreciate you listening. And I hope to do more of these in the future. And as I said, I just pray that those come together. I have a number of people that I would like to interview, and Brian and Jonathan Feldstein just happened to be first on the list, or the first ones to say yes. But actually, they're the first ones I asked, so they both said yes. So I'm at 100 so far. So anyway, so thanks a lot. And I probably will not do a midweek update because of these interviews. And Sunday, we'll be talking about Israel and a lot about AI. There's just some incredible things going on that we need to talk about. So we'll see you Sunday. And Brian, thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. God bless.
God bless.